Hi, my name is Melissa Doherty, and I serve as the Science Communication Specialist at the Kentucky Academy of Science, a scientific society with 5,000 members and a mission to catalyze scientific communication and collaboration to improve research, education, and evidence-based public engagement within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In today's Sharing Your Science conversation, we are joined by KAS's Science Communications intern, Dr. Wilson Gonzalez Espada of Morehead State University, and Dr. Jim Howard, Distinguished Fellow at the University of Kentucky Center for Applied Energy Research, and Dr. Jack Groppo, Professor in the Department of Mining Engineering at the University of Kentucky. He's also Program Manager at the Center for Applied Energy Research. And we are excited to have them join us today to talk about their work specifically with coal ash. So, if you guys could each just take a moment and tell us a little bit about your background, where you studied, and how you guys got to this point in your careers.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. My name is Jim Howard. I'm a retired now, but a geologist with the Center for Applied Energy Research. I started there in 1978 after getting my PhD at Penn State. Uh, at first, we're looking a lot at sampling in coal mines throughout the state, both surface mines and underground mines at coal preparation plants. And then by the 1990s, we started moving into a lot of sampling with power plants and sampling the fly ash streams, bottom ash, flue gas desulfurization materials, things like that. By the early 2000s, we were beginning to see some interest in rare earth elements. And by 2011, 2012 timeframe, this really took off with funding primarily from the Department of Energy. I was on some NSF work as well. And so that's how we ended up where we are today.
Thank you. And Jack, what about you?
I am a mining engineer, of course, as you said in your introduction. My BS and MS were from Virginia Tech. My PhD is from the University of Kentucky. I have worked in mineral processing as my specialization. I've worked in industry, academia, industrial research. Been at the UK for about 40 years, I guess, and came to the mining engineering department in 2016, I think. So I've been teaching here, and the goal was to merge the compatible research interests or synergistic research interests of the mining engineering department with the Center for Applied Energy Research. So I work in both areas, and currently we're um, doing a significant amount of critical materials work, and the scale of our operations, our research activities are so large, we really can't handle them here on campus, the main campus, which is why the Center for Applied Energy Research is so integral to our activities. So we have new facilities that we're modifying and upscaling for the work that we're going to be doing.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. Uh, Wilson, would you mind, before you get started with your questions for them, just kind of sharing for our listeners what drew you to this research specifically?
Well, I have heard in the news recently the need for rare earth metals, agreements between nations to find them for some of the new technologies that are emerging. And I found their article and I thought it was really interesting that was relevant to current events and at the same time that there was research done here in the state.
I agree. I think it's really interesting that some of that newsworthy stuff is happening right in Kentucky, and I'm excited to hear more about you guys' work. And I know Wilson's got some great questions for you.
Yes, I was gonna go ahead and start. Before we go into coal ash, both of you guys are part of the Center for Applied Energy Research. Can you tell us a little bit more at what the center is and what are some of the research lines that you guys are working on at the center? The center is working on.
Okay. I'll start and let Jack finish up with some of the more recent things. Uh, like I said, I've been there since 1978. The center actually opened in 1977, and it's always been there as something as a place responsive to the basically the energy needs of the state. In the 1970s and 1980s, a lot of it circled around coal, of course. So there are programs in coal liquefaction, uh, fluidized bed combustion, and some other areas. Liquefaction evolved into more into research and catalysis, which goes on today. Uh, the fluidized bed combustion that changed somewhat over the years, and different things came on as the needs changed. And so today, can still recognize the what was there in the beginning, but has changed considerably. And Jack is more in tune with what's happening now, I believe. So let him talk.
Yeah, the I think probably every university in the United States has a energy research program because the needs are great. The University of Kentucky has an energy research campus. I think that's the distinction. We've got a land which has been made available at the university to the university from the state. We've got a cluster of, I think, 9 buildings right now, one under construction for a new one. So the scale of these operations can be much larger. So we work in cementitious materials and recycling. We work in graphite and carbon nanotubes, carbon research, thin film solar, biomass, critical materials, CO2 capture and sequestration. So, the programs keep changing as the demands and the needs. If you're successful, you outgrow your research program, which means that you bring it to commercialization and there's a marginal need for research, so you move on to something else. So that's kind of been the legacy of the Energy Research Center. It's a great opportunity for students, especially because they get to work side by side with full-time researchers. So it's a dream come true for advanced education. And we have a lot of international postdocs and research scholars that are traveling through and spending time here on a regular basis. So it's a real gem for the Commonwealth. It really is. Most people don't know about it, but it's a real gem.
Is it doing mainly as publications or more commercializations, or is a combination of both?
Commercialization. I think there is publication that takes place, and we do. Jim is a prolific publisher, and we do publish, but we do contract research, government-supported research, cost-shared research for private enterprises and so forth. So I think I don't remember the numbers right now, but I want to say that it's around 20 to 25 million dollars a year in external research grants throughout the various programs. And it's all focused on applied. The applied is the thing that makes what we do different. There is a little bit of basic research, but not that much. It's mostly driven by commercialization and applied technologies.
Okay, thank you. Now, my understanding is that nationwide, we're moving away from coal power plants and more into some other types of fossil fuels and renewables. What's the situation in Kentucky in general? Do we have less coal burning or is it still about the same?
Well, there's certainly less than what there was a few decades ago, and even 10 years ago, it's less than that. Uh, at one point, probably 95% of the energy produced in Kentucky was from coal generation. That has changed. A lot of those plants that were coal-fired units have been shut down, and gas turbines have been put in their place. Many of the utilities have arrays of solar panels. There's some talk of some at least small scale nuclear generation. So it has changed. It's more diverse than what it was. Coal is still there, and the role is, in the future is debated, but in general, it's fading away. Uh, and this, like I said, some of the plants that once existed are no longer even there at all. So you can't even turn them back on again. Yeah.
So you're still getting some of the coal ash. That's your main research material. You're still getting some of that?
Certainly for our work with the rare earths, that was the raw material that we were dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. For the audience, what is coal ash? What is it made out of? How is it normally disposed?
Uh,
Uh,
Jack,
but well, it's what's left over after burning coal. Coal is comprised of organic material and inorganic material. It goes through a thermal oxidation, obviously, where the carbonaceous material is combusted to harvest the BTU content. So for the purpose of steam generation for power. And what's left over is what doesn't burn. So it would be the inorganic material, which is primarily aluminum and silica. And whatever inorganic material was in the coal formation during the coalification series. So it's whatever's left over, plus a little bit of the carbon, which wasn't completely combusted. So we generate right now about 75 million tons per year of coal ash in the United States, or
Wow.
coal combustion byproducts. That's down from like 120 at its peak, and it is a a critical material. Actually, it's vital to for the as a pozzolan for making highly durable concretes. So there are regions of the United States where we have a coal ash shortage, where we actually import it from overseas, believe it or not. It is stored in landfills, and it can be harvested by going back and recovering these landfills if necessary. And some of that is practiced today in some of these areas where concrete demand is quite high.
So it's used mainly as a concrete component. Do you know any other
Yeah,
uses?
it has a bunch of other uses. I mean, it's used as structural fill. The flue gas desulfurization material is a synthetic gypsum. So we have very clean air now. We don't have an SO2 problem because all plants are scrubbed, and they're scrubbed with limestone, primarily a calcium-based sorbent, which produces calcium sulfate. And if you control that reaction, you can, through proper oxidation, you can produce gypsum crystals, calcium sulfate to hydrate, and that's used for the production of wallboard. So
Mm.
if you live in this part of the country, the Southeast, uh, more than likely the wallboard in your house or at Home Depot came from a power plant. That was the raw material. So instead of mining gypsum from a mine where you're subject to whatever natural geologic impurities might be there, you can control the reaction in a power plant. So that's a primary beneficial use. But it's used in structural fill. It's used to make as an additive in plastics. It's used in all kinds of things. But the major use by volume, or excuse me, by weight, would be in cement applications, either as raw material for production of Portland cement or as a substitute, as a pozzolan, to improve the performance properties of the concrete that you produce.
Okay.
we've known of power plants that really do sell all of their material. They have a market, like Jack says, in the industry for the fly ash, sell their bottom ash, uh, sometimes as granules for road material or as fill, and they sell the fly ash as gypsum. Sometimes with the wallboard plant set up directly next to the power plant, so it's not even being transported in any means except maybe on a conveyor belt. So it can be very, very efficient.
So currently, there's a lot of uses for coal ash, but at some point, decades ago, it was just dumped in landfills. I think one of you sent me a information about a book called Valley So Low. Can you summarize what happened with coal ash that is talked about in that book?
Well, in that particular case was dealing with the ash spill at Tennessee Valley Authority's Kingston plant in December 2005. And yeah, in that case, the fly ash was being landfilled, and that's the case in in many for many power plants. If the carbon content is too high, it's not really applicable for the cement industry. They want a very low carbon content, and so there were ashes that just were not marketable. So they had to be disposed, and
Hmm.
in some places maybe they're too far from the market and they have difficulty selling everything they've got. In the case of Kingston, uh, the retention dam failed and the ash spilled into the adjacent river. And
And
that
what were
was
some
that.
of the environmental and health consequences of that?
Well, of course, it blocked the river for a while, and a lot of the ash ended up in the within the sediments within the river. Uh, and then for the people who were tasked with trying to clean this up and get it all together again, of course, the ash is just naturally dusty when it's dry, and I mean, there are small quantities of toxic elements associated with it, particularly arsenic. And so this became a problem. There were some health issues with the workers who were dealing with that over the course of many years.
Hmm. So it's something similar to, let's say, 9/11. There was an event. There were people trying to, mitigate something, and then they end up being sick.
Maybe a different scale and
Yeah.
certainly a different level of publicity, but still an environmental problem.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Now, most people know about metals like copper, aluminum, iron. You guys were looking for rare earth metals. Most people don't know about these. What are rare earth metals? What are some examples and some of their uses? What are they important in today's technologies?
Jack.
The
Jack.
the whole discussion has began with rare earth elements, but has evolved into a more encompassing term, which is critical materials. The rare earth elements themselves are the lanthanide series, which are elements number 50. What is that? I'm looking at my chart here.
57.
57 through 71. Jim's got them memorized. Those they're the ones at the bottom of the periodic chart that most people don't pay attention to, but they are very they're critical for a lot of our applications, and we're most interested in the ones for energy production and defense, because those are our renewable future is predicated on the availability of these elements, and our defense technologies are extremely um, uh, uh, reliant upon these elements. So the ones that would neodymium is probably the most common one, which makes very strong magnets. Those magnets are used in all renewable rotating technologies, like a wind turbine. A wind turbine is going to contain a very, very strong magnets. So those permanent magnets are rotating, uh, fixed with a rotating, rotating within a winding of copper wire is going to be that's how they generate electricity. Same thing with hydroelectric turbines. Stronger the magnet, the higher the more efficient the whole generator is. So the reason that we have been using iron magnets, ferrous magnets for a long time, they are so much heavier and less efficient. The rare earth magnets are much stronger, so that allows you to make more efficient turbines. So they're smaller and they're far more efficient. So they would fit in applications like small scale hydro, They allow the wind turbines to be larger, so they would make actually the conventional turbines larger as well, be it a gas turbine or anything. Just anything that rotates. Anywhere you need a magnet to generate electricity, rare earths are going to play a role. And neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, those are the ones in small combinations within them. Um, for home applications, if you have a hard drive, not a solid state hard drive, a spinning disk hard drive, the magnets on that are neodymium magnets. They're rare earth magnets. They're very strong. So if you take those apart and have those magnets stuck to a filing or metal table, you cannot pry them off. You must slide them off. They're very, very strong electric fields. So they're used in lots of different applications.
And Dr. Howard, any other critical materials that we should know about?
Lithium has receives a lot of attention because of batteries, and that's more of an issue maybe for a place like Nevada, where there are a few mines that have been discussed, and sometimes very different geology for those mines because you can get lithium out of carbonates, out of some igneous rocks, and also out of brines, like around the Salton Sea in more the southern end of the state. Uh, so it's an issue all around. There's just different materials that are needed for different things, and you need a lot of it. You know, the batteries and all the materials for a large truck or scaling up to a nuclear submarine and then to a battleship. As Jack was talking about, defense has a big interest in this stuff. You're starting to talk in the tons category. Cell phone you don't need much, but for big applications you need huge amounts, and
Mhm.
that's where the issues come in and supply and uh, just the general availability.
Okay. Now, in your research, I'm sure that it's not just a matter of getting some coal ash and sifting and filtering to find these materials. It's a really complicated process, right? Can you summarize it in an easy way for the audience to understand?
Well, the first step is finding the right ash,
Hmm.
and we knew a lot about the geology of eastern Kentucky and where certain coals were enriched in certain elements. And the fire clay coal down around Hazard and Heidemann area, that part of eastern Kentucky is particularly rich in rare earth elements, owing to a volcanic ash fall which happened at the time that peat was being deposited. So we knew that if we could get ash that came from that coal or largely from that coal, we'd have a good starting point. So when we did some of our initial research, uh, we made special arrangements with the utility to get that ash or that coal rather, and produce that ash so that we could have the fly ash that was particularly good for our work. And then for the larger scale work, uh, we still had material that was very much enriched in rare earths. So you start with a good starting material. Uh, at least the rest of the job is somewhat easier. It's not easy in a true sense, but you have it's better to start with something with 500 parts per million than something with 200 parts per million, and that's the scale we're talking about. So Jack can tell more about the how we get to the next step then.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the numbers, as Jim is talking about, we get all excited when we see something that's got 600 parts per million. That's two orders of magnitude at least lower than the starting material for most rare earth resources around the globe, especially those in China. So it's very difficult for us to be competitive. Actually, we can't be competitive because theirs are so much higher and they have so much more of it. The what makes the fly ash attractive is that it is enriched in the elements that we want for specifically for these energy and defense applications. But what first we have to do is remove the carbon and we do that by physical processing, flotation, the same thing that we do to enrich minerals to separate them. We attach it to air bubbles to remove the carbon, and then we're left with a residual that has maybe very little carbon in it and enriched in rare earth elements, and then that must be leached in order to remove the rare earth elements. And that's the hard part because fly ash doesn't leach well. It's very difficult to leach it. So our partners that were doing some of the leaching work or Winter Water Services, we're using concentrated nitric acid, high pressure leaching, and we're able to get um, material from we were able to leach material from the fly ash, but it's not an easy thing to do. And then the residual material left over would then be usable as a concrete additive. So that was the whole business concept from the whole project.
And then to actually, can you get the purify rare earth metals at the end of the process?
There's a couple other things that have to happen. Solvent extraction needs to take place. We are currently building an extensive solvent extraction train at the Center for Applied Energy Research. But we've been able to produce rare earth elements as a mixture of relatively high purity, 95% pure, which is good and completely useless because when the rare earth elements are all together, you can't do anything with them. They must be separated.
Oh, okay.
So that is the next phase. So we can do this. We do this commercially, and we're trying to find ways to do it more efficiently, more cost effectively. But we're using commercial extractants, which would rely upon the valence of the rare earth elements in order to extract them from the remaining materials. So the current project we're working with is going to focus on neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, samarium, and something else, yttrium. And then there will be a buildup, hopefully, of some cobalt, lithium, manganese in solution, which we can then demonstrate that we can selectively precipitate them. So we're after all of the elements. Once you getting them into solution is the first problem. That's very difficult to do. If you get them into solution, well, then now you must get them out of solution in separate forms and reduce them to pure metal. So that's the current project that we're working with.
That sounds like it's a kind of complicated long-term process. I was
It
going to
is.
ask you at the end of the road, how much of these materials can we get? Is it economically feasible? Maybe if we process a lot of these ash from landfills, or maybe not.
We are. I think coal refuse is is a better route right now. That would be the rock associated with mining coal, because it hasn't been melted into this fused vitreous mixture that fly ash is. Again, it's much easier to leach it. So we're working with the a high ash coal right now. That middling fraction, that same coal seam that Jim was talking about, it has not gone through combustion. When you combust it, you have high temperatures, 1400 degrees C. You melt the ash into this glassy matrix. And dissolving a glassy matrix it's very, very difficult. I mean, you need copious amounts of acid, and we don't want to go there. So we're looking at coal refuse as opposed to coal ash. Personally, I think is a more attractive option because while it's still extremely difficult, it's much easier than doing it with fly ash.
Okay.
It can
Well,
be done. We can do it with fly. It can be done. However, the chemistry is so severe, and the conditions are so difficult that, as I say, just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should.
mhm. Well, if somebody can figure out how to get some of these rare elements out of these materials is you guys at the Center for Applied Energy Research. You guys have the manpower, and I think you will figure it out, right?
We hope so.
Well, we know we can do it. We've done it. We know we can do it. The question is, can we do it in a cost-effective manner? So we're working with improving the high-cost areas of the technology. Can we improve the throughput, which would reduce the cost? Can we improve the selectivity, which would reduce the cost? Can we come up with new extractants, new extractant methods? So there's plenty of opportunity to improve. But now we have to keep in mind that we're up against an international. We don't have any domestic resources. The ones that we have are so limited, and they're all going to use these technologies. So if somebody finds a very rich rare earth element deposit in the United States, wonderful. We still have to go through all these processes to extract
Hmm.
the elements. So there's application for fly ash, for coal ash, for rare earth minerals, for wherever we're able to find.
Okay, Melissa, you had a couple more questions for our guests?
Yeah, I think this is so interesting and something that, I had no clue that after the use of coal, that the ash is still continuing to be useful. I'm very much one who I love to see a full circle and for things to be, completely used up in a process. So that part was really fascinating to me because I think, as we talk about renewable energy, sometimes coal, gets a bad rap or people kind of look down on coal as being, an old technology and a dirty technology. But I think when you start to understand that the coal burning is one piece of what can be used of that material, I think is fascinating. And I that was not something that I had ever heard of. So then when it's used for concrete or, the next piece of the use, I think that cycle is really interesting. And I think when, we hear about these topics in the news, we don't hear about, well, we're seeing this usage throughout other things. And so I think sometimes it's easy to kind of get caught up in that, well, this is bad and this is good without really understanding the full process. And so then I think when you guys are looking then even further at that material and how can we further make that byproduct useful, I think this is just very interesting. And I think it's something that will continue to follow the Center for Applied Energy Research more closely in the future because it is such important work and it is kind of one of those topics that's really been at the forefront of a national conversation, but also a global conversation in the last, 15, 20 years, especially. Um, Switching gears just a little bit, can you each tell us about a time when you faced adversity or things didn't go well in a project or in your research, and how that may have shaped you as a researcher and a scientist? It can be a little bit of a tricky question, but I think what
Yeah.
our goal with this is to, as we work with younger scientists, and we're encouraging young folks in the state to pursue STEM and pursue those opportunities right here in the Commonwealth and not, study here and then go elsewhere, that they've got, opportunities here. Part of this question is we're trying to, encourage folks to see it through even in those challenging times. So if you guys got to have an example of, some adversity that you may have faced or, how that shaped you.
I don't know if it's really adversity, but uh, back in the later 90s and very early 2000s, we were doing a lot of work with mercury and coal because mercury emissions were a very huge issue. The Department of Energy was funding work uh, looking at different technologies to remove mercury. And so there was a lot of interest around the country, and we were involved in some of it. And in one case, I made arrangements with a power plant. It's actually the same one that we used uh, for our rare earth studies to once again get a coal seam, run by itself. Excuse me, by itself. We knew there was some mercury content with it. We wanted to see the coal seam in place, see what it looked like once it was delivered to the power plant, and then what the fly ash looked like. It turned out that coal seam not only had a large amount of mercury, it also had a large amount of rare earth elements. So that mercury study turned into a rare earth study, which is unusual. Usually, when you do a study, you're focusing on one thing, maybe. You're not looking for maybe multiple results like that. But it was that and some of our field work looking at the fire clay coal, which was some of the fundamental work that was cited by the Department of Energy then in the 2011 2012 timeframe when they were looking to gear up in the rare earth research. So just that happy accident of running across a coal seam that was rich in rare earths and seeing how it was concentrated in the fly ash, that was some of the basis for our later work. So may not get the results, may not get all the results you're looking for, but look at all the data because there may be more there that's just hiding a little bit, and just have to tease that out.
I think that's a really valuable lesson because, so often when we are, running experiments to test a particular hypothesis or we've got a specific focus, it's really easy to kind of have these blinders on because that's what you're looking for. But I think you bring up a really good point about, keeping your mind open, keeping your process open to what other things you could find by like you said, a happy accident. And Jack, do you have anything to add to that?
The nature of the work we do is, it's research, but it's not a clean environment. It's not a pristine laboratory environment. It's pilot plant scale operations, and which it takes a lot of ingenuity, a lot of creativity, and you roll up your sleeves and you dive in. And like right now, we're this project we're working on right now is a perfect example. So we have 36 tons of coal that was delivered because that's how much we need in order to be able to end up with a couple of kilos of rare earth elements at the end. All right, fine. The truck dumps in the parking lot. We have to get that to a powder. How do you do that? Well, you do that by every day going out and crushing and grinding and grinding and crushing and trying to get all of this put together takes a lot of creativity and you can't go buy what you need. It's not available. There's no market for this type of equipment. So we make most of what we need. We fabricate it. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it fails spectacularly. Um, so there's a lot of head scratching, and um, there's no hierarchy of ideas here. Whether you're a hired hand, a summer student, whether you're a technician, or whether you're a PhD professor, your input's all valuable. It all matters the same. So we're all in this together, and it's none of it's easy. It's fun. It's very gratifying to get it done. But again, it's one problem. You solve a problem today, and then there's six more to solve tomorrow. So we're finding that when students recognize the long-term opportunity that's involved here, that we're getting a lot of student input from this. We have a lot of student activity involved in this because we're not telling them what to do. We're doing it with them. We're working side by side with them. So, when this is over, I will change into my real work clothes and I'll put on my hard hat and we'll go out and I'll get filthy this afternoon, just like I did yesterday and the day before, and I will really enjoy the shower when I get home tonight. And hopefully we'll get it done. But no, it's not easy, but it is very gratifying. It's a good, honest work with roll up your sleeves, work with your hands, dive into it.
I want to add to that, like Jack said, it's dirty work. And when I was sampling in coal mines, I was in there actually getting it. Sometime in one case in a blue gem coal, the coal was 24 inches high from floor to ceiling. And you're lying on your side and using a pick to pick it off the coal seam. So it's not easy, but in the end, you know where that sample came from. You can trust it more so than something that was delivered to you because you know how it was how it was sampled, what happened to it in between, and that's part of the job. And sometimes it hurts, sometimes you get dirty, but you feel good afterwards.
That's awesome. I think that's a really interesting thing because a lot of times when we talk about, research, people think, okay, a lab coat, we kind of have this preconceived notion of what research looks like. There's always that picture of somebody in the lab in a pristine lab with a lab coat on, and I think that's what a lot of folks have come to envision in terms of the public about what science is and what scientists look like, when in reality, you're going out in and physically chipping away at your samples, or you're getting in there, getting your hands dirty with your students, grinding the coal down to the powder that you need. And so I think part of what we're hoping to accomplish with these sharing these stories is to broaden the view of what science is, and also to share how much interesting work is happening right here in the state of Kentucky, right here in our backyard. It's not this, far off thing. It's really, truly happening right here in the state. And if we continue to support, our science education, and we continue to encourage folks to pursue those STEM fields, what Kentucky can do for ourselves and for our nation and for the world is really, I think the possibilities are almost endless if we can just continue to foster that right here in the state and in our country. I do want to ask, what's next? What do you guys kind of see as, you guys have talked about several different projects and several different pieces of this. Is there anything in particular that you can share? Sometimes we know that that can't always be shared out. But what's next for you guys in terms of this type of work?
For from
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Well, for me, of course, I am retired, so it's more a matter of wrapping things up. But one thing we're still actively doing, and the papers that Wilson saw and really brought this attention, we're looking at this material on a much finer scale than has ever been done before. With scanning electron microscopes, transmission electron microscopes. We've had some good partners in doing this work, and we're sometimes seeing things down to the atomic scale, which is great. Of course, the tinier you get in your scale, the less material you can actually work with. So we have to pull all this together and integrate that nanometer scale to the bulk analyses that we're typically using, basically to understand where those analyses that we might get with our standard chemical analysis, where they are coming from. So that's kind of what's happening with me. Jack?
I think the part that I find most I'm looking forward to the most is that finally, we're going to be incorporating e-waste, electronic waste, into as a feedstock. The technology we're generating is agnostic with respect to substrate. We don't care. It could be an ore, it could be fly ash, it could be waste coal, it could be e-waste, and we have done a horrible job. We currently do a horrible job in the United States with recycling e-waste. We just export it. And that's ridiculous. It's absurd that we continue to do this in this day and age. We export our garbage to developing nations. And that's irresponsible. We need to process it here. And I think the way that we can do that is be incorporating it into the feedstocks for rare earth or critical material recovery, because that then would reduce our need for the conflict minerals, things like coltan. Well, everything's coming out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and there's a great deal of human strife that takes place there to provide the materials we need so we can have our cell phones and things, and then we just throw them away. So I think we need to close the loop, and the way that we can close the loop is here, doing this. Shred up the electronics, do physical separation, incorporate them into the leaching, get the rare earth elements or the critical materials back, put them back into the supply chain. That's the only way we'll ever be able to bring the supply chain back to the United States in a realistic way, is by providing the raw materials we need, which we don't have. We don't have the geologic resources, or the geologists haven't found them yet. Well, while we're waiting for them to find them, they're right there for us. They're in our e-waste, and that's what I think I find most exciting about this. And that's why I haven't retired. That's why I'll continue to. I should retire, but I'm not. I'm going to keep pounding away until we actually get this done.
I think that's great and that's exciting, and I think that's a really um, interesting piece of this whole, where do we get this materials puzzle? And I feel like that could probably lead to another hour-long discussion, but to respect you all's
It
time,
could.
I do just want to encourage our listeners to make sure that they follow the Kentucky Academy of Science on all of our social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and of course, YouTube. And we encourage folks to also go over to the UK page and follow the Center for Applied Energy Research, which we will be doing shortly if we're not already following, so that we can keep up with this very interesting research. And so we want to say thank you to you guys for both being available to share these stories with us and share this work with us, and hopefully we can help promote that work and get that information out to the public in Kentucky and let them know what's going on right here in our backyard. So thank you guys both for being here.